And now we have the psychological intervention after disaster workshop today, adding a very interesting and new component to our overall capacity building effort. So we are very grateful, very pleased to have this additional dimension in our program.
My name is Rainer Silbereisen. Unfortunately, I was not able to attend the workshop due to an unhappy accident. When this had happened, I was wondering who could substitute for me. And of course, Professor Tom Cook was the absolute first choice.
So I want to welcome you all here. I'm glad to see so many people here from so many different countries. It is refreshing, and it's the same case last year. And I know we will get to know each other as the days go by. We haven't had formal introductions, one person to another. But believe me, if this is like the last one, you'll soon become friends with people from many different countries.
I would like to welcome all the participants to this workshop, taking time off from your regular duties and agreeing to spend 4 days, morning to night, in this workshop. I know the program is very, very heavy, so I wish you all the best for this workshop, and we are very thankful that they give us this time to train the young minds of Asia along the lines that that is required. So thank you very much, and all the best for your 4 days here.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Taipei. And I'm the director of the international program, Center for Sustainability Science, which houses the international IRDR, International Center of Excellency. I welcome you here, and I hope you learn a lot here and interact with each other, and then to enhance your capacity in order to help out all the victims after disaster. Thank you.
This is the fourth in a series of workshops on the Asia-Pacific region. Before that, we had workshops on the same topic in a different region of the world, which is adjacent to Asia, namely the Caucasus region. And the wonderful thing for me as a person as well was that we could bring together people on the issue of disaster, including war, that are in a state of war, their countries, against each other. And I can tell you the human atmosphere was very different from the atmosphere on the battlefield.
Well, Asia and the Pacific is an area that is high in the incidence of disastrous events. The second reason is that we need to develop the capacity for Asian scientists to strengthen their research capacities, research capabilities.
The idea is that this is fellow scientists helping fellow scientists. So the costs for travel, etc., are covered, but there is no honorarium. And interestingly enough, the best of the best can be attracted by that. And we have meanwhile, over all those workshops, a group of faculty that attended workshops more than once, and it was composed differently, and it represented about the following elements. There was typically something on genetics, something on environment, something on methodology, and then people really involved in research on disasters, more on the individual level, more on the community level, and more on the family level and the individual level. Professor Chen is from Taiwan, and she is a social psychologist by training and has conducted longitudinal research on several disasters and typically demonstrates the consequences for individuals short-term and long-term.
But I'd like to share you one photo done by a young boy who was a survivor at the 921 GG earthquake in 1999. And at the time, he made a record being trapped the longest time, probably 5 days or several days, in the ordeals and got rescued. But this young boy was not lucky enough because he lost his parents and his young sister. So when he was rescued, put in the hospital, he was mute, no words at all. Yeah, we should say probably he got so panicky and so shocked. So they asked a clinical psychologist, a child clinical psychologist, to approach him.
Can you give us some specific behavioral avoidance mechanism that you've seen among the respondents? Yes, ma'am.
That is in the PTSD measure. And according, because nowadays they are to debate whether there are 3-component model for PTSD or 2-component model for PTSD. PTSD consists intrusive symptom cluster and also avoidance cluster. Mm-hmm. It's kind of a general avoidance behavior, thinking or behaviorally.
Okay, ma'am.
Yeah.
I think mahjong is a way of support.
Professor Patton is an expert in cultural or national comparisons in how people react to disasters, concerning individual effects, community effects, policy effects, and I think he is among the faculty the one who sees the relationship between the institutional order and individual responses most clearly.
This is looking at testing that theory for earthquake preparedness in three different countries. These 3 countries were selected because of their relative positions on sort of Hofstadter's individualism, collectivism scale. Now, the argument is that it would be physically impossible to test a theory in every single country on the planet. So we've got 3 countries, relatively high individualism in the middle, and high collectivism in Taiwan.
I appreciate your presentation, especially in the part of the conclusion, where you emphasize that after the prevention and response, there should be recovery. Because in the Philippines, specifically in our province, in Albay, we have been awarded for DRR, but they admitted that they lacked in the recovery part, especially in being gender specific, and also in the children, where we have the girl and the boy children, and being very specific for their needs, especially in disaster. So I'm really banking on your last note, where you said we could support probably financially or technically in terms of funding, or like supporting the programs that we have started for psychological wellness program. Thank you.
Professor Gewürz is a specialist in trauma, in its effects on families, and how one can do intervention. This relates to disasters, it relates to war experiences, etc. And she is also very good in research on resilience.
So I'm going to use a theoretical model called social interaction learning. And I'm not going to spend a long time talking about it, but essentially, this model suggests that children learn from the social interactions they have with parents, right? So that, for example, when a parent, because he or she has not maybe been parented him or herself, has never learned how to be a parent, doesn't have a model for what a good parent is, engages in a very series of many negative interactions with a child, what we would call coercive interactions. For example, Norden, do you want to play with me? You'll be spicy child. So let's say I come home and I am a single mother, very tired, and I come in and Norden has his feet up and he's watching the television, and I say, Norden, why didn't you do your homework? What do you say?
I'll do it later, Mom.
You always say you'll do it later, and your teacher told me you never do your homework. Go do your homework now.
I never My dinner first.
No, you will not. I'm going to take away your dinner because you don't do your homework. Go do your homework now.
Okay, Mom.
All right.
Professor Johal, with a very interesting background, is a psychologist who advises communities and governments about preparation to disasters and consequences to disasters. He is from New Zealand and has experienced all the recent earthquakes there in person.
So what can you do to communicate with your stakeholders? We've taken a decision in our team that we're going to always put out two products. We're going to put out a public sector, public information product, and we're going to try and underpin it with an academic output as well. So we decided that flooding was a real and present danger in New Zealand. People weren't talking about it enough. So we wrote an editorial, and it got published the next day by the Dominion Post, which is the paper in Wellington. It's read all around the region. And there had been some floods that had taken place, and we wanted to address that.
I'd just like to ask, because you presented it in a New Zealand context, I'd just like to ask, in the Philippines, we're a very developing country, a third world country. I just wonder, how can you be able to really advocate for mental health if your priority as a country is really to get this, to have these people, you know, to have food and shelter and clothes, which is the main priorities, and really mental health is not a priority in itself, since the government is really busy, you know, covering for funds and the basic needs of these people.
Sure. It's a really good question. When you have scarce resource, how do you allocate those resources? How do those decisions get made? So the WHO defines health as all of health. Okay, it's not just physical health, it's mental and physical well-being too. Essentially, you have to make a business case. You have to go to your treasury, your financial decision makers and say, okay, so you can choose not to do this. What is the cost of not doing this?
Well, Professor Cook is, I think, the world-leading expert in experimental and quasi-experimental design. His main contribution to the workshop is to demonstrate to people that one can come up with causal explanations even without experimentation, and these quasi-experimental designs are badly known in the region, and he's also a great human being. I think he speaks 7 languages.
This talk is about meta-standards. Your standards for saying what are standards of evidence. Right? That's what the talk's all about, meta-standards. The inventory standards I talked about are the top end for scientific prestige. If you want to get published in the best journals, you got to do those things, or you're dead. What you're dead means you won't get published. It means you spend a lot of time. It means if you care about these standards and these gatekeepers of scientific prestige, then you're not going to get your foot in the door. Right? The gatekeepers are savage. Now, you may not care about those gatekeepers and those standards, but then you've got to come up with your own standards that you can justify.
You have given one example of life skills training specially.
Good for you.
Yes, you said that this doesn't work or there is no enough evidence, or what is that? I didn't get that condition.
I had it on the slide,
yeah.
but I was getting all these signals here, so I omitted that slide. It said that the following. If you look across these different inventories of effective practices, how much do they agree with each other? That was what it was. And I was saying that there are certain programs that have come up as stellar on all of these programs.
This time we also had a young scientist from China who had talked at the last conference, and I think she is the young person working with a more senior Professor Fan, and they have longitudinal data on Chinese earthquakes. And her presentation was so interesting because it gave Tom Cook an opportunity to demonstrate how a little add-on here or there can make a research even more strong.
Before 2008, there was a very limited research on the mental health problems after the natural disasters in China, especially among children and adolescents. So we set up this cohort study. The major purpose was to document the long-term mental health sequel of the earthquake among the adolescent survivors. Specifically, we are interested in describe the incidence and the longitudinal trajectories of some common mental health problems such as PTSD, depression, anxiety, and sleep problems. We also aim to examine some risky factors that may be related with the mental health problems.
Would that make a difference? Because in our Nepal context, it was like, we were in different places after the earthquake. Not all of them were in camps. We were out of our houses. For me, from my own experience, I was out of my house for almost 3 months. But we were very much in our own neighborhood, with our family, cousins, or neighbors, and in tents. But then, of course, for people who could not afford, they were sheltered by the government. So, how you take the data, who was offering what, and how they were involving themselves would make a huge difference. And that's what I was trying to say. Was it more spontaneous?
Okay, we have some experience in running this. So we typically have presentations by the faculty. This is a longer thing, and then we have a discussion round. And then a point is that the faculty, the lecturer, raises a number of critical issues that people are asked to discuss in groups. And then we form groups at random in order to avoid that. Then they discuss this with their knowledge, and the lecturer walks by and is available, but is not dominating the discussion. The good thing is they bring very different experiences. For instance, on this workshop there were, I think, 2 people from Nepal. And Nepal just had that earthquake. And of course there's a very small force of psychologists in that country, and so their experience is confronted with what people from the Philippines had to say, or from India. This is in and of itself already relevant and actually produces translation and transposition of experiences. And the task is that they would come up with a joint conclusion to each of these issues and then present this in the auditorium.
Knowing who's the right person to speak, what to do, where to go. And they all took roles on this. The Taiwan experience has a lot of volunteers.
Are meant, like is usual at international congresses, that you would show what you have done. Now, if it were all doctoral students or postdocs or young assistant professors, it would be their hardcore own research. In our case, it's often a poster on experiences they made. But nevertheless, it's then discussed with the faculty and always under the heading of how to make it such that it would have a clearer message and a clearer insight. And judged from what I have heard over all those workshops, people deem this to be a very crucial experience. And what is, well, for somebody with my background, of course, most surprising, they never had that opportunity. And I must say, even in our universities, not too many people have that opportunity. And I mean, I have to add, they get the full attention of world-class scholars for more than 4 days.
And our reflective learning from this research is that we should not never assume that help-seeking behavior is universally positive, because sometimes it means dangers, conflict, rejection, and criticism. Thank you.
How much did you pay him for that? That was amazing. Bang on, awesome.
Comfortable with the answer. You can't bear anymore. I mean, and it has a big percentage of 43%. You know, I don't know. Maybe there's an Indonesian term for that. That's why you had to use that one. But in English, when you say can't bear anymore, you could have used some other options to specify that can't bear anymore. Because looking at your face, I can't bear anymore. So let me just answer that one. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
The intensity of there might be some other reasons to exhaust this 43%.
Lost in translation, when they can take it anymore, because there's an escalation in violence in the.
Well, when we are in a particular country or a particular region, I think it's important that people in the workshop also see something of the culture and see something either of the hazards or the institutions that work with the hazards. So last time in mainland China, we were in the Sichuan region and indeed observed and went to a museum there and to the region itself. And this time we went to a research institute for disaster research, and then people see that these institutes are typically interdisciplinary and that their own discipline often is underrepresented, and this is why we're there.
If you have time to travel to Taipei main stage, I will show you a figure. Sometimes most of the risk is created by human being, not created by nature. So actually, nature disaster is not a natural thing. Most of nature disaster, actually, the reason is human being activity, you see? Because family will expand. Family is not a fixed size. So World Vision trying to give a lot of space so they can build some new house in the future, not use reinforced concrete. Also here are wooden structure. They call this kind of the garage that reserve some space for their future expansion.
And my follow-up question is, did you have issues as far as privacy is concerned? Because I've been working in Japan, and it's quite, and one of the rules there when you evacuate people is that the licensed social worker are the only ones who can pick up those elderly and people with disabilities. And the Japanese registration system is very strict, and they have these strict rules that only these people are allowed to pick up these citizens. Now, is that the case in Taiwan as well?
So some of them have very genius idea. In the gathering house, they prepare karaoke. They prepare barbecue. So they can have the joyful night in the shelter. So I heard now, when they know typhoon is coming, sometimes they will knock the door as tribe leader. So when we will go to the shelter. So some incentive, but it's case by case. So I think this is sometimes we love to say we should collect best practice. Maybe some best practice from other country could be our best reference. But I don't want to use one word when we describe disaster management. A lot of people will ask, Wilson, could you give us some SOP, standard operation procedure we can follow? I say, no, I don't have something like that. But I have SOP, it's standard operation principles.
Actually, a friend of mine liked it on Facebook, and I just thought of opening the file, and I just realized, oh, this is a good program.
So these workshops have been really important in my career. I was looking at that point in my career when I first came along as a participant for a group of people that could help to support me in the disaster, and I think for you as well as disaster researchers, disaster clinicians.
Of course, I really appreciate the organizers' concern from the very beginning until the actual event, how they were really concerned of our welfare.
So this we can also deal with that factor that if we train, who is questioning?
And I really like the warm and accommodating way that they treated us all through the rest of the workshop, and it would be forever be a memory to be treasured.
In Christchurch, the biggest stressor that people have. I think that the concept is excellent, and I think that bringing the future generation in to work in these areas is very important.
And if you see the data, here the female data for the adults and the female data for the children.
So, and I think this is a very good platform for me to learn all of this, and to take this learning back home and to share with my own students and my faculty and other researchers who are actively working.
Medicine more active, so the most work focus on
This is a workshop to build capacity to conduct research. And so future participants should have a research question, a small question that they would like to answer about interventions after disaster, and they should bring that question with them to the workshop. And at the workshop, they should think about what help they want to answer their question, so that when they go back, they have a design or a prototype of a research study that they can go and do.
Great faculty member, and also the scope of the content of this workshop is very good. It's significant for me to continue my work. Thank you.
The world is big. There's South America, there's Africa. And of course the idea is we could turn to a different continent.